Hey guys, it's Coach Goodrich. So this is coming at you with another PowerPoint for you guys for the notes. This is actually for 8th grade, which is my American history class. This is going to be Unit 8. We've actually already done Unit 8 in class, but because it was so quick and because I was out for a couple days because I was not feeling good, and now with all the digital learning going on because of COVID-19, I feel the need that I'm gonna go through both of these sections just really quickly, because I feel like you guys as the students probably need to get this, and for those of you that weren't there for a couple of days or just want a refresher, this would be something good that you guys can do and watch really quickly and knock them out. So this is Unit 8. This is late 1800s, early 1900s. Part 1 is going to be progressive movement. Part 2 is going to be imperialism. So you're going to see a lot about Teddy Roosevelt and industry and some of the impacts of the robber barons and captains of industry that we talked about from last unit. So essential questions. Number 1, how specifically did it progressivism change America? And number 2, how did the U.S. become a world power during this time period? Like I said, you guys have probably already gotten these. This is just a refresher, just in case. So we're going to talk about all of this stuff. Lots of political cartoons during this time. So here we go. So the goals of the progressives. First one, protect the social welfare. How can we relieve urban problems, provide social services that these robber barons, these captains of industry were kind of calling really were the calling card for. They brought these issues into the cities with all of these massive businesses that they had, and that's where all the work was. So you're going to have a lot of people moving there, a lot of immigrants moving there, and it's going to be just a huge cluster of people working in terrible conditions and then going home to live in worse conditions. A lot of overcrowding, a lot of disease, a lot of poverty, and it's the same things that you see represented kind of today, just to a little bit of a lesser degree. We have to protect the social welfare. We got to take care of the people who are doing the work, not just the people who are profiting and making the money. That's your first goal. One of the ways they did this was through the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association, grew during this time. They used money to establish libraries, pools, gyms, and they're going to have a lot of influences on the Boy Scouts. Like I said, going to be going pretty quickly through this, but there's no need to feel down. Another way they did this, the Salvation Army. Salvation Army started in London by a guy named William Booth. It was brought to the U.S. by immigrants Eliza Shirley and George Scott Rayton. It is a church dedicated to helping the poor and to spreading the Christian faith. It is a church organization that is run like a military organization. So instead of being like a preacher, a reverend, you're a colonel or a general, depending on where you are. But it's still one of the more widely spread churches out there in the world. You can go to worship service there, very much like the YMCA's. Like, you can still go there to this day. One of the more important people was a lady named Jane Addams. She's famous for starting what's called the settlement house movement, which is kind of like a nicer version of a homeless shelter, trying to keep families together, trying to get them place to stay, place to live, clean place to stay and live, better things to eat, trying to get them jobs, get them back on their feet. The most famous example was the Hull House, which was started in Chicago in 1889. Second part of what the progressives were after was moral reform. So we have protecting social welfare. Now we have moral reform. This is kind of going back all the way to Unit 5 for us, which was a temperance movement. This is just a continuation of that from before the Civil War. The WCTU is still around, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. This became the largest women's group in America. Not only did they go around and try to preach the benefits of abstaining from alcohol, but they also opened kindergartens, went in to talk to prisoners in asylums, sane asylums, and they also worked on women's suffrage. Their ultimate goal was prohibition. They were led by Carrie Nation. Carrie Nation, yes, she's still around. The giant of a lady, both physically and metaphorically that she was. Remember, she's the one that goes around with hatchets into saloons and liquor stores and smashes all the beer bottles and whiskey barrels and everything, and she usually has a horde of women behind her. There she is. Faithful to the cause of prohibition, she had done what she could, weighing in a whopping 6 feet, 170 pounds, and winning that wrestling division in the state of Illinois several times. Part C was economic reform. Big business, led by these guys right here, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, was out of control. It was running America. We saw the political cartoons in the last unit where literally these people are owning the government. They're running the government. J.P. Morgan single-handedly bailed out the U.S. government time and time again because they have all of this money. And a lot of people are beginning to get a little upset at being screwed by this, and they don't want this to be the case anymore. So you're going to have a lot of people start to approach, a lot of the workers, a lot of the common people, the working class people, the Dorothys of the world, if you're going to follow the example from The Wizard of Oz. How are they going to stand up? How are they going to try to get things back in control, back into the favor of the working class? One of the ways they did this was through a group of people called the Muckrakers. Muckrakers are going to be a group of journalists who are going to go out of their way to expose society's ills. The most famous of these was a guy named Upton Sinclair. He's going to write a book called The Jungle, which is going to describe the evils of the meatpacking society in Chicago primarily. We read portions of this last week. It is really gross, but it's very, very interesting. All of the terrible things that goes in there. You know, people say that you don't want to see how the sausage is made. For the most part, that was very, very true. And his reforms, or his speaking out, led to a lot of reforms for the USDA and the Food Administration. Another very prominent muckraker was Ida Tarbell. She comes out with a history of Standard Oil, which is a pamphlet that basically just craps on John D. Rockefeller and his company, Standard Oil, and basically saying how it was a joke that he was able to control so much of what he did, and it detailed all of his underhand business practices, how he ruined people's lives, not just people that worked for him, but his competitors, in order to get what he wanted, which helped turn a lot of public sentiment away from him. And the last one was a guy named Jacob Riis. Jacob Riis was actually a photographer. He's from Denmark, as you can see on his forehead. But he's going to come to America, and he's going to take a photo editorial of the city of New York. And so a lot of these following pictures are from that just talk about how the poor people in the city lived in the slums and how they tried to make a living. So a lot of them are going to look the same. It's going to be very dark, very dirty, very crowded. And you see you got like 6 people in this one room that looks like the size of a closet today. People are dirty. It's gross. You have these kids sleeping out in the street. Another one from the inside with what looks like some sort of roast on the table. This blackened and not very appetizing looking. This woman and her baby outside, having to take a ladder to get to the upper room. No stairs. You see the walls are falling down. I'll give you one guess what you use that pot for over there. This bed or sofa or hybrid combination, both, is falling apart. Houses are slanty. Windows are broken. Doesn't look like anywhere that anybody civilized would want to live. So, and the last major way that the progressives tried to reform everything was through efficiency. How can you make the workplace more efficient? Efficiency means how can you make it simplified? How can we remove the middlemen? How can we make it cheaper and faster and more profitable? And that's through scientific management. And you have a couple examples here. This is Henry Ford right here, and his assembly line, which he did not invent, but he perfected. And they're able to make cars, hundreds of thousands of cars, that ran better than everybody else's for cheaper than everybody else, through the use of the assembly line, which made him a billionaire and also helped to profit a lot of people out there. One of the big things right now that's going on is the women, the suffragettes, out there trying to gain the right to vote. Eventually, they're going to get it with the 19th Amendment. Go women. Finally comes up during this time. Some more important people. Theodore Roosevelt is going to be a charismatic leader of our country. He's going to have a numerous assortment of jobs. He's going to be a cowboy. He is going to serve as Secretary of the Navy. He's going to serve as a leader of his own volunteer military unit. He's also governor of the state of New York. And then finally, of course, vice president, and then really finally, president of the United States. His deal, not to be confused with his nephew's deal, His political platform was called the Square Deal. Everybody's going to have equal. Everybody's going to have a little bit better, a little bit more of what they have now, and they're going to make the most of that. He's also famous for delivering his colory, his kind of motto for dealing with everything, his foreign policy, which was speak softly and carry a big stick. This can be translated into his relations with the Caribbean and Central America, which what is going to be called gunboat diplomacy, and then later on it's going to lead into dollar diplomacy with his people that came after him. Another famous president, the 27th, is William Howard Taft. He's another progressive president. He's really going to be more famous for being more responsible for being a trust buster, the guy that goes after the big businesses, than his predecessor, than Teddy. But he's actually going to become even more famous as one of the longest tenured Supreme Court justices, which is probably the job that he always wanted. And then, of course, all three of these guys are going to meet both these guys are going to meet with the next progressive president, Woodrow Wilson. And because of Teddy and Taft, who end up going to split that vote, we make our way for the 28th president, Woodrow Wilson. You see here who won 435 of the electoral votes because Roosevelt and Taft ended up splitting the Republican vote. So, as you see, that's going to lead us into American imperialism. And of course, we know what the definition is from your notes: the practice of establishing colonies in order to control raw materials and markets. Literally, the process of one country taking over other countries in order to establish an empire. Always makes me think of Star Wars. So, that should do it for this section, and then I will get on to the next one and get that uploaded. Alright guys, make sure you're going through these and filling these out, taking your notes, doing what we need to do in order to make sure that we're staying active and focused and engaged in our learning process. This will be uploaded to my YouTube channel. Once again, this is 8th grade, Unit 8, Part 1, which is the progressive movement, which is a redo of previous one that you guys have already talked about. This is just for review. I'll have you guys watch this and the next part, the Imperialist Movement, Part 2 of Unit 8, on the first Monday that we're back, which will be on the 30th of March 30th. Appreciate it, guys. You guys stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you guys soon.